So I want to talk a little bit about why there's such a disconnect between the NT wives and the ASD husbands. And this is a kind of oversimplification, but the NT wife, when she's under stress, she will tend to, not solely 100% of the time, but her tendency may be to implode. And one of the ways that can look is depression. The ASD man will tend to, not 100% of the time, but will have the tendency to explode. An example of that would be rage. So the end result of having a long, troubled neurodiverse marriage is the NT wife is often the one that's more depressed. The ASD man is often the one that does more of the meltdowns or shutdowns, which is a way to avoid meltdown. The other dynamic in place is the NT women needs to talk about the problem. I didn't say wants or prefers. She needs to talk about the problem. She wants to share and talk about feelings. She prefers a connection during stress and crisis. The ASD man most often does not want to talk about the problems, doesn't want to share emotions, is out of touch with his emotions and her emotions, and prefers a disconnection through stress, anxiety, crisis. The NT woman will want to seek support and associate when she's trying to problem solve and troubleshoot. The ASD man will want to disassociate, and he does that in the form of a shutdown, where this is too stressful for me, I'm going to have to leave. And so why this stark difference is because the NT wife is highly developed socially and emotionally. The ASD man, not to her level, but he is highly logical. And so she's kind of filtering things mostly through the emotional brain. He's filtering things mostly, not entirely, the logical brain. And so what I'm trying to do here, as odd as it sounds, is I'm trying to normalize what you two are going through. This is not normal. Well, it is normal because he's wired one way and you're wired a different way. So all these things that you're experiencing and all of these issues that you're going through, given the disparity between the NT female brain and the ASD male brain, is very normal. It's to be expected. It's not a surprise. There's nothing going wrong. There's no malicious intent. So one person has a survival mode, the other person has a different survival mode. One person has a connection mode, the other person has a different connection mode. So yes, I want to normalize the dynamic in place. If you're in a neurodiverse marriage, what you have been experiencing is typical. I've worked with thousands of neurodiverse couples. And what everyone you in here is experiencing as a couple, that is what the others have experienced. This is not my opinion. It's my informal research on a ton of anecdotal reports and working with people one-on-one. I see it all the time. I'm not saying it's fair, unfair, right, wrong, good, bad. I am saying it's a challenge. I am saying it can be hurtful. I am saying that sometimes it feels unfair and just plain wrong, but I wouldn't go on how it feels. Just know, at least if not in your heart, know in your head that everything that you've experienced, based on the dynamic involved in the neurodiverse couple, everything you're experiencing is very typical, very normal, very routine. If you want to turn your troubled neurodiverse marriage around, you will have to do the following. You will have to do the following. Both parties will have to learn more about each other's strengths and weaknesses. They will have to avoid judging or blaming each other. They will have to find a new balance of separateness and togetherness, independence and intimacy. They will have to translate their complaints into requests for change. They will have to learn to identify and talk about their fears instead of acting them out, and they will have to see each other in a new light. In other words, we are both gifted and challenged. Message to neurotypical wives out there. Have you ever wondered, how can I tell when my autistic husband has felt like a failure in marriage for so long that he's actually just given up? Okay, well, in this video, we're going to take a deep dive on that. Stay tuned, because at the very end, I've got some tips to pull yourself out of this loop. It doesn't usually happen in a single moment, not with a slammed door, not with a fight, not even with an anniversary forgotten. It happens quietly over time.
Your autistic husband doesn't leave the marriage all at once. He retreats inch by inch, breath by breath, until one day you realize that while his body is still home, his heart has gone missing. For many men on the autism spectrum, marriage can feel like a never-ending test that they keep failing. Despite genuine effort, good intentions, and deep love, they're often told, directly or indirectly, that their way of connecting isn't enough. And over the years, those small daily messages of failure accumulate until one day he simply stops trying. So let's unpack this in a series of phases. Phase 1. The silence is no longer protective, it's final. In the early years, silence might have been his coping mechanism. When conflict hit, he withdrew to regulate, to calm his nervous system and avoid saying something hurtful. That kind of silence, while painful, still had hope inside it. It was a pause, not a full stop. But when a man has reached emotional burnout, his silence changes tone. It's heavier, longer. It's no longer about self-regulation. It's about surrender. You feel the difference. He no longer circles back to finish the conversation, to repair, or to reconnect. He doesn't cool off. He just goes cold. Phase 2. He avoids connection even when you offer it gently. There was a time when he wanted to bridge the gap, but didn't know how. Maybe he'd sit next to you while you watched TV, or offer to fix something around the house, and that was his version of, I care. Now he sidesteps even small opportunities for closeness. You invite him for a walk, he says he's tired. You reach out for a talk, he changes the subject. You share a vulnerable feeling, and he stares blankly or gives a short, dismissive answer. This isn't cruelty, it's defense. He's learned painfully that connection equals failure. Every attempt has ended with him misunderstood, criticized, or shut down, so his brain concludes, better not to try at all. Phase 3. His special interests become his safe harbor and his escape. Where connection with you once brought comfort, his focus shifts fully to what he can master. You'll see him spending more hours in his hobbies, technology, work, or online spaces. These are not just interests to him anymore. They're places of refuge. Why? Because in those zones, he feels competent. He understands the rules. The feedback is predictable, and there's no emotional minefield. In the marriage, he feels chronically incompetent. No matter how hard he tries, he gets it wrong. So he retreats into the one world where he still feels like a success. Phase 4. You no longer see effort, just maintenance. There's a profound difference between coexisting and connecting. When an autistic husband has emotionally given up, he'll often still show up functionally and go to work, handle bills, fix things when they break. But the emotional labor stops. There's no curiosity about your day, no interest in shared experiences, no effort to repair or apologize. It's not laziness or cruelty. It's learned helplessness. He has tried and failed so many times that his nervous system now tells him, don't even start, you'll only make things worse. Phase 5. You feel invisible and he feels irrelevant. In the neurodiverse marriage, both partners often reach a mirrored kind of despair. The neurotypical wife feels unseen, unheard, and uncared for. The autistic husband feels inadequate, rejected, and unloved. Each interprets the other's pain as indifference. She thinks he doesn't care anymore. He thinks, I'll never be what she needs. In truth, both parties are grieving the same thing. A marriage that once held promise, but now feels like an endless loop of misunderstanding. Phase 6. His words reveal hopelessness. When he does speak about the relationship, listen closely. You might hear any of the following. You'll never be happy with me. I'm just not relationship material. No matter what I do, it's wrong. I can't do emotions like you. Now, these aren't excuses. They're confessions of defeat. He's stopped arguing because, in his mind, the verdict is already in. He's guilty of being too much, not enough, or simply wrong. Hopelessness sounds calm, even rational, but underneath it lies quiet despair. Phase 7, he's polite but not present. When he's reached emotional shutdown, you'll notice surface level civility. He might still say thanks or sure or good night, but there's no felt connection. It's the voice of someone performing the role of husband, not inhabiting it. This is the moment that breaks most neurotypical wives. Not the anger, not the arguments, but the absence of aliveness. The sense that he's no longer in the marriage, just around it. To the outside world, it might look like he doesn't care, but inside, he's drowning in shame. Every attempt to meet your needs, to express affection, to understand emotional nuance, has ended in perceived failure. Eventually, shame becomes unbearable, and the nervous system does what it always does under threat. It shuts down. He hasn't stopped loving you. He's stopped believing he's capable of loving you in a way that matters. Think of one area where your husband used to try, even awkwardly, to connect. What might it look like to acknowledge that past effort, not as failure, but as evidence of love in his language? So when your autistic husband stops trying, it's not the end, it's a signal that he's overwhelmed, ashamed, and convinced he's unfixable. But connection isn't about perfection. It's about creating safety for two wounded people to try again, gently, slowly, and without keeping score. Because sometimes the bravest thing an autistic man can do after years of feeling like a failure is risk trying just one more time.
It boils down to this. It's about this simple. You're either going to value the marriage more than you do your space, or you're going to value your space more than you do your marriage. And if you choose more space than more marital connection, then you've by default chosen to have the dissolution of the marriage in most cases, unless you're just going to tough it out. So, in summary, you guys get to pick. You signed up for this marriage. You signed up for it. Nobody put a gun to your head and said, marry that lady. You did it. So you're already in it. You're committed. If you don't like it, then leave. Do her a favor and do yourself a favor and just leave if you're going to keep playing games. If you value the marriage more than you do, and again, it's okay to have some space of decompression time. You need that. But if you abuse the privilege, then you're abusing the marriage. And don't come crying to me, not that you would, if she leaves. That's all I got to say about it. Your wife is probably no doubt an intuition expert.
Mm-hmm.
And she can read your facial cues, even though you may think you might not be divulging anything with the nonverbal language facially. But she will read one eyebrow that's raised a little weird, or a little voice inflection has changed because she can tell that you're upset. You don't have to do much in the way of body language or voice inflection. If it's different than the normal, which she knows what normal is, and you don't have to reveal much information because she can pick it up in the wind. With mind blindness, that ability is severely compromised, where it's hard for me to imagine what another person might be thinking or feeling. To oversimplify it, although this captures it well, it's a problem with imagination. She can watch a movie unfold, and let's say it's a romantic movie, and she will be able to predict or imagine the outcome based on limited information. That's why I tell these NT ladies they have to be concrete He doesn't have the intuition and ability to peel himself out of his skin, crawl into your skin, and look out of your eyeballs and know what you're thinking and why you're thinking that way, and totally understand why you would have a particular opinion or perspective on something. He doesn't have that level of talent like you do, the NT wife.
Shh. You want to know a secret to a happy marriage? Marry a woman that loves football every bit as much as you do. Yeah, that's my wife right there. Shh. Message to autistic husbands. What's the absolute number one thing you can help in your neurodiverse marriage with your neurotypical wife? Spend time with her. Just be with her. Not necessarily doing anything for her. Just be with her, be near her, be present, and not distracted. No cell phone, no computer, nothing. You're just going to be next to her, and she is your special interest for the moment. Quick message to a neurotypical wife married to an autistic spouse. You know what the absolute number one thing you can do to help your neurodiverse marriage is to catch your autistic spouse doing something right and point it out. Say, hey, I appreciate that you did that. You know what the number one dynamic I see play itself out in the neurodiverse marriage where one spouse is autistic and the other one is not? The neurotypical spouse always feels lonely. The autistic spouse always feels like a failure.
The neurodiverse marriage has got so destructive, and it's understandable. The two of you are wired almost 180 degrees in opposite directions, since it's so hard to make a connection when you're on opposite ends of the spectrum. This, I know I'm preaching to the choir at this point, this marriage has been super stressful. And both parties, I'm talking about him and you, I'm not just picking on you, he's just as guilty. Both of you have adopted a victim mentality. When both parties do that, your amygdala now is on high alert. Both parties are at an unconscious level scanning for bad news. I'll use you as the example. What's he going to say next that's going to hurt? What's he going to do next that makes me feel like I'm not important? What next thing that I need him to do is he not going to follow through with? And he does his own version of that with different things to you too. So now both parties are scanning for bad news. They're just kind of expecting it. And they're waiting for the other shoe to drop, which now you've set up a self-fulfilling prophecy, because as soon as you start scanning for the next bad thing that's going to happen, you find it quickly. And you will over-focus on it. And then when it happens, you will overreact to it. And then you will turn it into a memory, an emotional memory and a content memory. Think of something disastrous that happened with him that really hurts your feelings bad. You have the content memory, you remember what was said and done in that moment, but you also have an emotional memory. So every time you replay that event that was really hurtful, you also replay the emotions that you felt at that time. And even though that specific event only happened once, when you keep replaying that movie, it feels like it's happened 100 times. And this sensitizes your brain to negativity in the fullest sense of the term. You've heard the brain is plastic. You know, the brain has this thing called plasticity. You're literally rewiring your brain to recognize, focus, and react to the negativity at a scale much higher than what you originally did in the first year of marriage, for example. And then if that wasn't bad enough, both parties will tend to unintentionally ignore the positive. They can't see your husband is doing something right, but you're blinded to he could be doing something right, but you can't even see it now. And he does the same thing with you. And as you know, if party A is negative, it brings out negativity in party B. And now party B then reinforces more negativity in party A, and you bounce back and forth and you get this synergy, this exponential effect where 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, 1 + 1 = 5, all of which it reinforces your need to scan for even more bad news. It reinforces your amygdala to be on even higher alert. And if this goes on for very long, guess who gets sicker? Who?
because you need to connect and process things and debrief in order to get your cortisol level down. He's over there de-escalating and decompressing by hyper-focusing on his special interests for extended periods of time. He always gets relief. And you never get relief. That's why she's the one that's always complaining about depression and fibromyalgia and rheumatoid arthritis and autoimmune disease and numerous other things, because she never gets off of the cortisol hot plate. And this doesn't make you feel any better, I understand that, but I want you to know what the hell's going on. At the very least, maybe you will take some of these things less personally and realize, okay, well, he did that shit again, but I'm pretty sure based on what I know now, that was a trait. I don't think there was a malicious intent. I don't even think he knew what the hell he was doing. He didn't even know what's going on half the time. So not only was there not any malicious intent, he was totally absent. His behavior and the consequences of his behavior and how it impacts me doesn't even register in one brain cell. It was not premeditated at all.
As you know, last time I said feel free to share last week's video with your NT wife, which I'll be asking again today. And one of the guys in here who shall remain anonymous and who is no longer here must obviously shared this video with her, because she emailed me and said that I'm pitting the ASD husband against the NT wives. And as you recall, last time I mentioned this business of bullying. I didn't accuse anybody I didn't accuse any wives in this group last time, nor will I do it this time, of bullying. I didn't point anybody out per se. I said sometimes it happens. So essentially she didn't like that message and asked for a refund and essentially pulled him out of group, which is called bullying. So she just exemplified the very damn thing I was talking about. Thanks for proving my point. So the only reason I'm bringing this up is because some of you guys have been bullied and didn't even know it. So I want the NT wives to listen to this. If me pointing out the discrepancies and the double standards makes me an instigator, sign me up. Call it what you want. If you want to call it instigation, fine. I call it pointing out the double standards. And sometimes she's hurt because you're not showing any empathy. Let me just put it in the form of a question. How many guys, you don't have to raise your hand if it's going to be embarrassing, how many guys in here feel like there's many times where they haven't got any empathy from their wife? So they accuse you of having no empathy, and they do the same damn thing. They accuse you, and I'm speaking in general terms, I'm not suggesting that this goes on with you, but they accuse him of being emotionally abusive, and they do the same damn shit. So that's why I'm bringing this up, because it is your business. How will I know if I'm being bullied? When you can't win. If she wants you to say or do a particular thing, you do it, and she yells and is mad at you. That same thing, and you don't say it or do it, you still lose. Doesn't matter which way I go, either one, I lose. That's called bullying. So what you want to do, and I'm finally getting to the point of this whole thing, in that case, is not bully back, not to get mad or accusatory or any of that. You just want to do what I'm doing and point out the discrepancy and the double standard, but you don't want to say that. You don't want to say, hey, this is bullying, this is a double standard, this is not fair, blah, 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 because this is just going to download in her mind as an attack. And you've just created another problem on top of the first problem. Your line instead is, it seems to me that if I do it this way, the particular situation in question, some of you will have something in mind as I say this. You say to your wife, when I don't do this thing, I'm in trouble. But if I do that thing, I'm in trouble. So it would be helpful to me, and that's going to be your big line. You use that a lot. It will be helpful to me if we could rearrange that situation such that I can get a win every once in a while.
So in working with neurodiverse couples, both the NT spouse and the ASD spouse, I have run into, for many years now, this thing where there's basically 3 different anger styles. And usually the spouse will exhibit one more so than the other 2. So the first one we're going to call the knee-jerk reactor. Now this spouse goes from 0 to 100 just like that. They're easily and quickly triggered and they go off instantly, repeatedly, over even small infractions. That's the knee-jerk reactor. Then we have what I'm going to call the stuffer exploder. This person stuffs their feelings. Something's frustrating, they stuff it. Something angers them, they don't say anything. Something is annoying as hell, and they try to sweep it under the rug, anything to keep the peace, and they stuff and they stuff and they stuff, and then they explode. Big time. Then they feel guilty for exploding and go back to stuffing again. Then we have the stuffer imploder. This individual will stuff their feelings, sweep it under the rug, anything to keep the peace, on and on and on and on, and they never explode. Rather, they implode, and that implosion is depression. Okay, so we have the knee-jerk reactor, the stuffer exploder, and the stuffer imploder. Which one are you? Today I want to talk to the NT wives, or husbands as the case may be. When you go on too long with your message delivery, or when you try to tackle more than one issue at a time, your ASD spouse is going to run into brain overload. We're just going to call it data overload, because you're providing too much data too quickly. He's not able to absorb all of that. And so at some point in your message delivery, let's say, for example, it's a 20-minute discussion, or in this case, perhaps a monologue, he's going to get to the point where he's not going to be able to listen or understand or retain. So think of your ASD spouse as that old computer that you used to have that has so much software on it and so little memory space that when you turn it on and you work on it for a little while, it slows down, and at some point it freezes, and then you have to shut it down and reboot it, and then it takes forever to start up again, but then when it does, it kind of runs a little faster than it did previously. So your husband on the autism spectrum is like that slow computer, and the more data dumping you do, the more data overload he runs into, and then the rest is history, because at some point he can't even listen to you anymore, because all he can focus on is his anxiety or how he's feeling criticized. And if you continue to data dump, he's only going to be able to listen to 80% of your message. And as you continue to data dump, he's only going to be able to understand 60% of what he listens to. And as you continue to data dump, he's only going to be able to retain 40% of what he understands. And as you continue to data dump, he's only going to implement about 10% of what he retained. So of your 100% message delivery, you're only getting about a 10% return on your investment of time and energy. I hope that makes sense. So here are some examples of data dumping. When you talk too long, when you tackle more than one issue at a time, when you come at him when you're emotional or upset, either angry or crying, when you come at him with poor timing, in other words, he's not prepared, he didn't know that you were going to have the talk, he's doing something else. So you're coming at him at a very inappropriate time for him because it disrupts his routine or structure. The other component of data dumping would be when you speak in vague terms, especially when you talk about how you feel and expect him to take how you feel and apply it to some course of action he's supposed to take. Okay? Feelings, especially if you have alexithymia, are vague. So your expression of feelings is not his motivation to change. And lastly, another data dumping component would be jumping from the current issue to multiple past issues that he can't fix now. So there it is. Your data dumping downloads as data overload. Then he is going to do some version of a meltdown or a shutdown. Literally, he's going to have to shut down and reboot. A message to the neurotypical wives out there who suspect that their husband may be on the autism spectrum. Have you ever found yourself thinking, something is just different in my marriage and I can't quite put my finger on it? Maybe your spouse is brilliant, responsible, loyal, yet emotionally distant, hard to read, or easily overwhelmed. And maybe conflict feels one-sided. Maybe communication feels like two people speaking different languages. Okay, if so, you might be wondering whether autism spectrum disorder could be a part of the picture. So today I'm going to walk you through the subtle, often missed signs that your husband may be on the autism spectrum, or wife as the case may be, and how to mention this possibility without triggering defensiveness, shame, or shutdown. Now, this is going to be a compassionate, non-pathologizing guide because the goal is not to label your spouse. The goal is to understand each other better and build a marriage that actually works. Wouldn't that be something? Many adults with ASD level 1 go undiagnosed. They grew up in a time when quiet, quirky, smart, or independent kids slipped under the radar. And as adults, they often thrive in predictable routines, excel in specialized areas, love deeply, but struggle in neurotypical relationships. And their partners, often neurotypical, end up confused, lonely, or misunderstood, not realizing the communication styles are neurologically different, not intentional. So let's talk about what ASD can actually look like inside a marriage. Here are some telltale signs that your spouse may be on the autism spectrum. 1, literal thinking and difficult reading between the lines. If your spouse often takes your words at face value and misses subtleties, hints, tone, or implied requests, this is classic ASD communication style. You say, "I'm cold," and what you mean is, "Can you close the window?" But your ASD spouse hears, "Oh, she's just reporting the temperature observation." 2, emotional shutdown during conflict. How often have you lived that one? Arguments may trigger overwhelm. So instead of engaging, he may go silent, withdraw, or become rigid in his stance. We call that defensiveness. Now, this isn't avoidance, it's neurological overload. Number 3, intense focus on interests or routines. He may rely on predictable patterns, same food, same routes, same hobbies, same schedule, and when disrupted, he can become anxious or irritable even if he can't explain why. 4, social exhaustion and preference for solitude. Even if he loves you deeply, social gatherings may drain him. He might appear aloof or uninvolved, but internally he's managing sensory and social load. 5, difficulty expressing feelings despite having them. Your ASD spouse may feel love strongly, but show it indirectly through acts of service, problem solving, practical support, but emotional language may be limited, confusing, or uncomfortable. 6, sensory sensitivities. Noisy environments, bright lights, certain fabrics, or chaotic households may create tension or impatience, often misunderstood as moodiness. Number 7, a strong sense of fairness and logic. He may rely on facts over feelings. He values being right because predictability and consistency feel safe, and this can make emotional disagreements feel threatening or illogical to him. Number 8, difficulty with perspective taking. Not because he's selfish, but because cognitive empathy is different. He may have trouble predicting how something might emotionally impact you unless you state it directly. Number 9, black and white thinking. Gray areas can cause anxiety, so what seems like stubbornness to you is often a need for clarity, structure, and certainty. Number 10, deep loyalty and low drama. While ASD can create challenges, many autistic partners are faithful, honest, dependable, protective, and deeply committed. They may not show love the way you, as the NT wife, expect, but he feels it intensely. Now, if several of these traits fit your spouse, you might be wondering, well, how do I bring this up without hurting him or embarrassing him or triggering defensiveness and so on? So let's look at a very compassionate roadmap. Number 1, do not start with the word autism. Start with the experience. So in other words, instead of saying, well, hey, I think you might be autistic, say something like, you know what, I've been learning about different communication and processing styles, and some descriptions feel familiar to our relationship. Would you be okay if we were to explore this together? So this keeps the focus on partnership, not diagnosis. Number 2, normalize the concept. Many ASD traits are strengths. And so you might say, you know what, some people are wired to be steady, logical, and focused, and sometimes that comes with challenges in communication or emotional expression. I see a lot of those strengths in you. So this provides safety and dignity. You're leading with strengths here instead of weaknesses. 3, use I experience instead of you always. So avoid accusations, speak from your lived reality. Instead of saying, well, you never listen, say, yeah, sometimes when I'm trying to connect emotionally, I feel like we miss each other. I'd love for us to understand why that happens. So this involves curiosity instead of defense. Number 4, present ASD as a framework, not a flaw. You could say, you know what, understanding your wiring and mine could help us reduce misunderstandings and communicate in a way that works better for both of us. Now this shifts the focus towards solutions rather than throwing the past in one another's face. Number 5, empathize partnership over pathology. You could say, you know what, I'm not saying anything is wrong with you. I'm saying I want us to have a common language for understanding each other. So in this way, you're removing the potential for shame. Number 6, avoid armchair diagnosing. Instead of asserting, invite exploration. For example, some descriptions really sound like us. Would you be open to learning more together and seeing, what fits and what doesn't? This respects his autonomy. Number 7, offer strength-based examples. If ASD is framed as a problem, he's going to feel attacked. So balance the conversation, and you can say something like, you know what, your loyalty, your calmness, and your ability to solve problems under pressure are huge strengths. I think understanding your wiring would help both of us appreciate your strengths even more. So this strength-first framing is going to equate to lower defensiveness from him. Number 8, time the conversation wisely. Don't bring it up during conflict or stress or fatigue or overwhelm. Choose a quiet moment when both you and he have the capacity. Number 9, know his likely defensive responses and stay calm. Common reactions are going to include, are you calling me defective? Well, everyone's autistic these days. Or you're overthinking this. Okay, if this happens, don't react. Just respond gently. You could say, you know what, I'm not criticizing you. I'm trying to understand us better because I love you and I want our marriage to feel easier for the both of us. See how this is an us thing and a we thing rather than a you thing? The we statements and the us statements establish some safety, and defensiveness melts when safety is restored. Number 10, reinforce the goal. The ultimate purpose is not diagnosis. It's better communication, fewer misunderstandings, a more satisfying marriage, and less loneliness for you and him. So everything circles back to connection. I got a bunch of questions here, all of which are from neurotypical wives about their husband with autism spectrum disorder. And these are questions specifically from the NT ladies in my counseling groups. And I thought I would just address them all in one cluster here instead of doing them individually. And so we'll run through here real quick. The first one, she asked, does autism spectrum disorder, does the diagnosis of that change anything? Well, the actual diagnosis doesn't change anything, no. It doesn't change who your husband is or what he can accomplish. It does give him somewhat of a roadmap to the traits that he's likely to experience and some of the treatment strategies to address those traits. But the diagnosis in and of itself doesn't change anything as long as the two of you know that you have communication breakdown and it causes a problem for both of you and you both want to fix it, then we don't necessarily need to label that anything other than communication difficulties. And the next question is, does ASD level 1 get worse with age? And the answer to that is not likely. Most teens and adults with autism spectrum disorder have less severe symptoms and behaviors as they get older. And that's not to say that all adults on the spectrum get better, but the vast majority of them will. Some of them do get worse with age, but that is almost always the case with the individual who has just excessive amounts of anxiety and depression, and then engages in so much destructive behavior to reduce his anxiety that his symptoms do get worse over time. The next one, can you be slightly autistic? Yeah, there's a spectrum, as you know. There's high functioning, moderate functioning, and low functioning. But even on the high end of the spectrum, which we call high functioning autism, right, there's another smaller spectrum. So that would be like high functioning, high moderate functioning, high low functioning. So there are some people that are so high on the high functioning end of the spectrum that they literally pass under the radar, and as far as everybody else is concerned, they're neurotypical. And the next question is, what are some of the red flags that I need to be aware of that may indicate my husband has autism spectrum disorder, as my suspicions lead me in the direction to believe that he does? Basically, if he has difficulty interpreting what you think and feel, if he has trouble interpreting your facial expressions, body language, and any other social cues that you give off, and if he has difficulty regulating his emotions, in other words, you witness shutdowns and or meltdowns, or we could also maybe call them adult temper tantrums, low frustration tolerance, these things would definitely indicate that a diagnosis, if he wants to seek a diagnosis, might be appropriate. What triggers my husband with Asperger's syndrome meltdowns? What triggers his meltdowns? Usually that has to do with sensory sensitivities, changes in routine, anxiety, communication difficulties that result in anxiety as well. So remember that people on the autism spectrum have this thing called mind blindness, which means they have a lot of unpredictability in their world, and so they try to make it as predictable as possible, and that comes through the use of a lot of routine and structure, and they don't like change as a result. And so when any changes to his routine come along, that is a trigger for a meltdown. But really, the changes in routine is just one form of anxiety producing events. So the big picture here is anxiety is the main trigger for meltdowns, and there's different components that could be subsumed under anxiety. Those would be like sensory sensitivities, changes in routine, communication difficulties, and so on. Can a person with Asperger's feel love? Well, I would hope that we wouldn't even have to answer that question. Your husband with, in this case, Asperger's, he's not an automaton or a hologram or a robot, although I have some NT wives that say her husband does come off like Spock from Star Trek. But of course they feel love. They don't necessarily display their emotions much. So he would have empathy, but he may not have displayed empathy. And what I mean by that is he may not behave in certain ways or say certain things that convey empathy to the level that you would want. But he certainly can feel love and can certainly express empathy. In fact, in some cases, believe it or not, the ASD individual is so empathic that he has found from a very early age that it's just too painful to feel that empathy. He feels too closely the pain of others, and that is so anxiety provoking that he literally shuts his feelings off. And so there it does appear that he's not a very loving, caring, sensitive, empathic person. And the next NT wife asks, what are the main symptoms to look for? Well, I touched on that earlier, but some of the main signs would be if your, in this case, husband, I assume, finds it hard to understand what you're thinking or feeling, if he tends to get very anxious about social situations, if he finds it hard to make friends and prefers to be by himself over there somewhere engaged in his special interest away from family, if he often seems blunt, rude, or not interested in others without meaning to, that would be a main sign. And if he finds it hard to say how he feels and finds it hard to comprehend how you feel. Those, I think, would be the main signs of autism spectrum disorder. Next, does ASD cause anxiety? Absolutely, 100%. I don't know anybody, and I've been working in this field for a while, who has Asperger's or high-functioning autism that does not have anxiety. There's varying degrees. Some have really high anxiety, some have moderate. But if they have super low anxiety and they've been diagnosed with ASD, they've probably been misdiagnosed. And the last question I'll entertain today is, do the symptoms of Asperger's syndrome or high-functioning autism ever go away? Sometimes it's possible that the traits outlive their lifetime, and so to speak. So some of the traits that the individual may have exhibited as a teenager, for example, he's no longer exhibiting those. So research does in the past several years has shown that children can outgrow a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. In other words, their symptomology has lessened or decreased so dramatically as they've grown into the teenage years and young adult years that if they were to go back and get retested, they actually would just fall right out, just outside of the zone of being on the autism spectrum. So, and a lot of that has to do with early intervention, making sure that the child is taught social skills and gets all the other interventions that are needed at a very young age. I'm just kind of paraphrasing what some of the questions are like. They're wanting to know why they cannot get their husband with autism spectrum disorder to get it, quote unquote. That being, it's hard for them to convey to him how important it is to be emotionally reciprocal, to spend time with them, to make her feel important, and so on. And so they've pleaded and argued and complained and tried to be nice and tried to be tougher and all these different things, and they still say, I can't get him to get it. But just remember that you're probably employing a traditional approach that would work with the neurotypical brain. If you were trying to plead with somebody else, let's say a neurotypical coworker, and you use the method that you're using with your ASD husband, the NT coworker would probably get it and would want to cooperate with you. But the method that most NTs use to try to get their ASD husband to connect, it actually makes a bad problem worse in many cases, because it downloads in his mind as she's being parental and punitive. And this often raises his anxiety level, which in turn exacerbates the very symptoms of the disorder that you're annoyed with, namely low on empathy. So the paradox is due to some of the traits of the disorder, specifically executive function, theory of mind deficits, and weak central coherence. We'll take a brief look at each of those. And this is basically, these are the three main traits that get in the way of the NT trying to establish a connection with her husband with Asperger's or high-functioning autism. So the first thing is executive function. Now, this can be defined as a way in which people monitor and control their thoughts and actions. It's actually a broad category that includes processes such as working memory, planning, cognitive flexibility, inhibitory control. Inhibitory control is one aspect of executive function, and it's the ability to restrain or inhibit potentially interfering responses and to self-regulate in certain situations. And if your husband can't self-regulate during difficult conversations with you, what that looks like is he either shuts down or melts down. And the second thing that gets in the way of her trying to establish a connection is theory of mind deficits. Theory of mind is the ability that we all have in order to make sense of the world we live in. Every person's thoughts, knowledge, beliefs, and desires make up his or her own unique theory of mind. From the ages around 4 years or so, typical kids, those without autism, understand that other people have their own thoughts. They have their own knowledge base, beliefs, and desires that will influence their behavior. However, people on the autism spectrum appear to have some difficulties conceptualizing the thoughts and feelings of others, and that downloads as lack of empathy in the neurotypical wife's mind. Since he has difficulty conceptualizing and appreciating her thoughts and feelings, she therefore makes the leap of logic that he evidently doesn't care, and he's selfish, narcissistic, and so on. So it is this mind blindness that may impair people on the autism spectrum to be able to relate to and understand the behavior of others. Mind blindness also means that, in this case, the ASD husband has difficulty in distinguishing whether someone's actions are intentional or accidental. So by failing to account for others' perspectives, people on the autism spectrum tend to misinterpret their messages. And many of the social skills deficits observed in people on the autism spectrum have their genesis in the lack of ability to decipher subtle meaning from the environment. For example, facial cues, body language, tone of voice, wordage, and so on. And then the third and last trait that gets in the way of the NT wife making a true connection as she would like is central coherence, and this is the ability to focus on both details as well as the big picture. So people with autism spectrum disorder appear to have a heightened focus on details rather than the big picture. And this is a cognitive style termed weak central coherence. Now this is the reason in this case, the ASD man has hypersensitivities to sensory perceptions. So the inability to hold information in mind in order to use it later in other tasks is what causes the person with ASD to lack central coherence. A lack of cognitive central coherence can easily cause, in this case, the ASD husband, to miss important and subtle cues that create meaning in a social context. So with these three traits that I just listed, central coherence, theory of mind, executive function, I don't really understand what might be in the mind of my NT wife in this case, what she might be thinking, and then what she might be feeling based on her thinking, and then why she behaves the way she does based on her feeling. And I don't understand her opinions, I don't understand her perspective, and sometimes her feelings are utter nonsense to me because I don't have an emotional vocabulary. I'm out of touch with my feelings, and therefore I'm out of touch with her feelings as well. So, long way around the bush to describe this, but in a nutshell, you have the NT wife who is highly social and highly emotional, and then you have the ASD man who is low perhaps in social skills and emotionality, but very high in logic. And so she appeals to him through emotions and from social competencies, while he tries to appeal to her through logic. She's speaking German, he's speaking French, and they don't understand one another. Loneliness inside a neurodiverse marriage is one of the most painful experiences a person can feel. You can be in the same house, even in the same room, and you still feel completely alone. And if you're married to someone on the autism spectrum, that loneliness can feel constant, because what you're craving isn't attention, it's connection. So in this video, I want to show you 3 simple, practical ways to start rebuilding that connection, even if right now you feel invisible. So stay till the end of the video, because I'm going to have 3 important tips for you. Number 1, we're going to call it micro moments of connection. Most people think connection happens through long emotional conversations. But in a neurodiverse marriage, it often happens in small bursts. Think about it. The quick smile across the room, the gentle touch on the shoulder as you pass by, or that 5-second hug before one of you leaves the house. Yes, these moments are tiny, but they send a powerful message. The message is, I see you. I'm here for you. We're still a team. Connection doesn't require words. It requires presence. So if you start practicing these micro moments, just 1 or 2 a day, you begin to feel small shifts. Not fireworks, but flickers of warmth that start melting the distance. Number 2, speak directly. One of the hardest adjustments for neurotypical wives is realizing that hints don't land. You might sigh or go quiet or hope your husband will notice that you're upset. He probably won't. It's not that he doesn't care. It's that he doesn't always decode social cues or read between the lines. So instead of waiting for him to guess, try saying exactly what you need calmly and clearly. For example, can you sit with me for 5 minutes? I'd really love a hug right now. Can you help me with this? Directness prevents frustration and confusion. And here's the beautiful part. It also builds trust because your ASD husband learns when she speaks, I can understand. And when I understand, I can succeed. And as a husband, I have felt like a failure for so long now. And that success makes connection feel safer for him too. Third tip, scheduled connection. I know that sounds unromantic, but predictable connection is one of the best gifts you can give each other. Maybe it's a 20-minute walk after dinner, coffee together on a Saturday afternoon, watching one show before bed with no phones allowed. When connection is part of your routine, it takes the guesswork out of intimacy. You don't have to wonder, well, will he show up for me tonight? Because it's already built into your rhythm. Predictability for your ASD husband calms his nervous system. It reduces anxiety for you too. And over time, those predictable moments become the heartbeat of your marriage. So remember, rebuilding connection doesn't happen all at once. It happens one small moment, one clear sentence, one shared routine at a time. You don't have to fix everything. You just have to start showing up again in small, consistent ways. Hey guys, this is Mark. Actually, I should say, hey ladies, because this is a video for the NT wives. I think the title of this video will be All the Things You Did Right and the One Thing You Did Wrong. But the things you did right, well, were replete. You did many things right. And here's just a few. This is just a tiny smidgen of all the things you've done right. This video is not meant to criticize you, by the way. In fact, if anything, it's meant to compliment you and encourage you. Several things you did right. You tried to get him to reconnect. Let's say, for example, in the beginning, he was masking. I mean, not all people with ASD level 1 mask, but let's say, for sake of example, you found this guy and you had emotional reciprocity and things were going well. And so he masked and tried to present well. And one of his masking techniques was to be very connected. And so once he stopped masking, he also stopped connecting. And so you tried to get him to reconnect. Your intentions were good. There was no malicious intent there on your part, trying to get him to, well, we were getting along so well. And something happened, and now he's involved in his special interest over here, and I don't feel important anymore. And so you tried really hard to get him back in the game. Yeah, that was a good thing. That's something you did right. Your heart was in the right place. You were doing the best that you knew how to do given the circumstances. You tried multiple things. You did your research online. If you're watching this video, obviously you're online researching ASD level 1, or you've been on this road for a long time and you're just kind of trying to continue to figure it out. You love this guy. We're using the NT wife and the ASD husband as the example. You love this guy. You respect him. You care about him. You may have even gotten angry with him, but even that was something that you were doing right, in my opinion. You weren't getting angry because you were trying to push him away. You're getting angry to try and pull him in. So I could go on for easily another 15 or 20 minutes pointing out all the things that you did right. The summary is this. You love the guy. You care about the guy. He's super important to you. The marriage is important to you. You've tried really hard to reestablish trust, reestablish a bond, reestablish hope, reestablish safety in the marriage. God bless you. You gave it your best shot. The one thing you did wrong, you assumed that he didn't care. You assumed that, well, all of this disconnectedness and this lack of emotional reciprocity is because he's selfish, insensitive, uncaring, narcissistic. No. This disconnectedness, this lack of emotional reciprocity, This seemingly lack of empathy is a trait of the disorder. ASD level 1 is a disorder such that the social and emotional brain is underdeveloped. So he doesn't match you with social and emotional intelligence. You're way up here. You're very socially and emotionally smart. He is not. You're very socially and emotionally skilled. He's way down here. You have a lot of social and emotional needs. He does not. And you assumed he's way down here because he doesn't care. No. He cares, but he doesn't know how to show that he cares. Hey, this is Mark Hutten. Would you like to schedule a one-on-one Zoom call? Okay, it's so simple. Just look under any of my videos in the description area. Click on this Calendar link. Now you see my calendar. Pick your month, your day, anytime that's available. Enter your name and email address. Then you'll get a follow-up email with the Zoom link on the day and time that you picked. And voila, we will talk.